Okay, well, we begin a new week this week on selecting measuring instruments or measurement instruments. Last week was about preparing a research plan and selecting a sample, and those are the chapters that you read. So this week, of course, you'll read chapter 6 on selecting measuring instruments, and you'll review those slides. I also put in a few sample preliminary literature review assignments so that you have those to review as you prepare your preliminary literature review. You'll complete chapter 6 quiz by the end of this week, and then you'll also complete a discussion. And it's just a chance this week to practice your skills with APA formatting for in-text citations and references. So you're going to find a research article to cite, and then you're going to include a quotation. Let's see, you're going to include an original sentence that you might write, the short excerpt first from the actual article, then an original sentence that you might write that paraphrases the excerpt with an APA in-text citation, then include a quotation from the excerpt of the article with proper APA in-text citation, and finally include a reference to the article that is APA formatted. So it's just an opportunity really to test it out, to try out whether you know APA format for in-text citations and for reference lists for different things, for instance for paraphrasing and also for quoting directly from a source. Make sure that you do both, and they are not the same. So if you have any questions about those, though, there is some review that you can do. Of course, back a few weeks ago there's learning modules on citations, and particularly there's some APA instruction in there. There's also the APA manual, right? The manual has lots of information about how to properly cite your sources and include those into your work that you've done. So that's the discussion for this week and the activities for this week. Finally, most importantly, is the preliminary literature review is due February 11th at 11:59 p.m. And so you are going to use the annotated reference list that you have been creating, and you're going to make that preliminary literature review, and it should include APA formatted narrative writing, studies categorized logically according to focus of studies and results, writing flows logically, systematically, and 7 to 10 sources. So this is an opportunity for you to submit something, and I will review it, give you feedback so that when you do your final literature review, you'll also be able to make those changes and get a good final lit review for the end of this class that comes up later, more near the end of the class anyway. So for this lit review, make sure that you are including methods and results from each reference study adequately presented. Make sure the lit review flows well with transitional and organizing sentences and paragraphs. The lit review organizes reference studies logically. And I should change that really quick because I think it needs to be according to focus of studies and results. So you really shouldn't organize it according to types of studies necessarily. So I've changed that. That's up here as well already. So proper APA formatting, and the document as well overall is APA formatted. 7 to 10 sources cited and referenced, and APA formatting for the reference list as well as in-text citations, as I mentioned. So let's take a look at some of these sample preliminary literature review assignments and just at what I'm looking for in a lit review. So if we take a look at this one is about bullying. And if you look, you'll notice that it begins with a running head. These are APA document format items, so it begins with the running head, has the capitals, part of the title in caps. Although I would probably prefer the title for yours to be the actual name of what you're talking about in your study. So this one might be bullying or something like that, rather than just preliminary literature review. And then you've got the page number here, and no longer is there a running head here. There's a preliminary literature review, just the title there. That's APA format. And it begins with the general idea of bullying, which is a growing problem. And so it begins with an introduction that kind of overviews what's going to be talked about in this literature review. It doesn't just dive right into all the citations and studies that people have talked about, but it tries to give an overview of the issue at the beginning. And this overview comes from the actual student, not from necessarily a lot of literature that they've read, although it goes into that literature a little bit more in depth later. And so now it's talking about bullying as a problem, and here are some theories that go with that problem. Social ecological theory provides a framework, so it explains what this theory is. Talking about students who tend to lack empathy for others or where bullying is a problem. And then it talks about how research has covered this concept of bullying. And so it really does flow logically in that it talks about bullying overall as a general problem, and then it talks about the studies that have gone into bullying, and it discusses a specific sort of, I guess, solution to bullying, which is the OLWIS bullying prevention program, as well as art therapy, and that's what the focus of the study is. A good preliminary literature review and a good literature review will go from general to specific, meaning that it will talk about the main or general issue at first and discuss that issue in some detail and cite literature on that, whatever that issue is, whether it's bullying or athletic height or jumping or education, quality of education for 4-day classes or whatever the issue is. It's going to start with like a general overview of the topic, and it will cite some literature in that general overview. And by the way, you can get some ideas about APA formatting and how that works from this one. And then it goes into more detail, into the depth, or into a specific area within that general problem. So maybe the general idea is the 4-day school week, which I think one of you talked about doing before, but is not anymore. And then it could go more specifically into the specific, I guess, findings from what, academic achievement as a result of that 4-day school week and whether that has changed or not. So that's the idea with a lit review. It's general to begin with, and then it gets more specific. And if you look at this literature review down near the bottom, we're talking now about art therapy programs and research done on art therapy programs. And so what this paper does, and it does it pretty well, is it begins with the general problem of bullying. It suggests several different solutions for the bullying problem, and then it advances the idea of art therapy as a possible solution to the bullying problem. And so again, it's gotten more general, bullying in general, and then it got more specific. What are some solutions to the bullying problem? And then it got more specific than that by saying, well, art therapy is one possible solution, and here's all the research that has been done about art therapy as a way to mitigate the bullying problems. So it gets general to specific. Another example here is the second one here on teacher mentoring. And again, this one talks about how the first year of teaching can be challenging, and many first-year teachers leave the profession. And this is all original to the student who authored this paper. This is not something that was written by someone else. They had to write this overview up to introduce the idea. So in this case, it does go from general to specific as well. It talks about this idea of teachers facing many challenges and often leaving the job as teachers within the first few years, especially in K-12 is what it talks about here. So it's kind of presenting again a problem, a general problem of teacher attrition, I guess you'd call it, where teachers leave the profession. So then it discusses the various pressures or problems that teachers might face in their first year. And getting more specific though, it talks about some of the solutions that might help with teacher mentoring. And it talks about those solutions as possible ideas that have been advanced in the literature and the things that the student has read as they've done their 2 to 3 article reading each week. And then finally, it advances one special type of program, the teacher mentoring program, as a solution to teacher attrition or teachers leaving the field. So again, it leads us into a possible study of a teacher mentoring program and the possible benefits according to previous research of teacher mentoring programs. So both of these kind of follow an interesting pattern, and I guess I haven't noticed this until now, but they kind of follow a nice pattern of being a general problem is what they introduce, then potential solutions to that problem, and then they go into depth on one of the solutions to that problem and discuss that in detail and what research has been done on that potential solution to the problem. So those are some example lit reviews, and hopefully those help you guide you as you produce your own lit review and you think about maybe a general overview of what your problem is or what your idea is, and then get into more maybe solutions to that problem, and then get into more specifics on maybe one specific solution that you would like to advance based, on the literature in the work. So that's a lit review, and that's a preliminary lit review, and that'll be due the end of this week. So just a couple of things to remind you this week. Remember in the syllabus that items that are due more than a week ago are no longer accepted in the class. So that's what the syllabus says. Again, you get 15% off for items that are late, but then if they're more than a week late, they're not accepted in the class. And so I think most of you, though, have been on time with all the different items in the class. And also for quizzes, your 2 lowest quiz scores are dropped. So that means that as you take the quizzes, you know that your 2 lowest scores are going to be automatically dropped, and they already are dropped in the gradebook, whichever 2 lowest scores you might have already. Those are dropped, okay? And finally, this week's topic is selecting measuring instruments. So I just wanted to show a few examples about that. So here's some work on some interesting areas that I've been interested in: increasing pre-service teachers' self-efficacy beliefs for technology integration. And as you think about choosing a measuring instrument for your research proposal that you'll be doing by the end of this semester, you want to think about finding something that someone has already used before. It's better to find something that has already been used and validated by another study already than it is to create your own instrument for measuring something. And the reason why is because just the fact that it has been validated, that it has been used before, gives it some credibility versus the fact that you just created it yourself. And so anyway, what I did to find an instrument that I wanted to use for a recent study was I took a look at how people are measuring this idea of teachers' self-efficacy beliefs for technology integration. So I took a look at this study, and I found that they had created their own instrument, and I'm trying to find what they called it now. So if I go to the methods section of the paper and I choose instrument, I can read what they call it: a Likert-style survey measuring participants' self-efficacy beliefs for technology integration was developed by the first author and used as pre- and post-survey measures. And the survey, it describes it, but then it also gives some evidence of validity. It says the evidence of construct validity is primarily empirical in nature. They did a factor analysis, which is a way just to figure out if the survey is done well. And they reported basically that it is further confirmed that these 16 items formed a valid instrument for measuring a single construct. So that's telling me, and also this Cronbach alpha, again, it's a statistical measure, but it's telling me that this instrument is probably reliable, that this is probably a good one. And so I thought about that, and I thought, well, this might be a good instrument to use. And it actually has it down in the appendix, all the questions, I believe, for this one. Yep. So there's the questions. So that tells me that it's a pretty good instrument, but also I looked at other studies, and I found that several different studies that came after this one have used this same instrument to measure teacher self-efficacy. And so that's a wonderful sign to me that this is a good instrument to use. And so as you look through and read, make sure you take a look at instruments and see if you can find a good existing instrument to use for your research. Have a good week.